6:30, bringing me attention. Everybody could stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. All right. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. The agenda is approved. Jackie, do we, nope, okay.
Wait, we have
Oh, sorry, Don. Student board member comments. Emily, what you got?
Wrestling state was this past weekend. We had two boys, Charles Broughton and Braden Barbelis, get top 10 in the state of Washington for us. Cameron Pike got 4th in her weight class as a sophomore, which is really impressive. And Braden is also a freshman. And then Sadie Evans got 2nd in state. Girls basketball made it to state as well. Their state playoffs is this Friday at Tahoma High School. I think it starts at 8. Come out if you can. And then for bowling, when we went to state, we got 9th out of 12th. And then that means 9 out of 122 teams out of the state of Washington.
Wow.
So
Awesome.
Awesome.
we're all going to state. It's really nice.
Love it.
That's really it.
Alrighty.
That's so awesome.
Moving along to the consent agenda, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Any discussion? Yep, we're good. You good? Nicole?
Yeah.
Any discussion? All right. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. The consent agenda is approved. Moving on to the Sandhill presentation.
Hello, Jessica Collins, principal at Sandhill Elementary.
Tyler Lundy, assistant principal.
And we have been asked to show off something to you guys. And this year we have decided to show off some reading growth. I wanted to reshare, and I know you guys have been looking at our data and following our data. This is a little bit more of a granular dive into our data. And so our reading goal this year is that in partnership with all stakeholders, 100% of our kids will make typical, and that is 1 year's growth, measured by our FastBridge screener in June. So what we're going to share with you today is our FastBridge screener from fall to winter. This slide is comparing last year's data from fall to spring, and you can see that 52% of our students were making typical and or aggressive growth. Aggressive growth would mean more than 1 year's growth. And you can see on right now, we are already at 64% of our students making that typical or aggressive growth. Very excited to see the 45% making aggressive growth. So we're kind of going to paint a picture today as to why that's possibly happening and what changes we will be making or have made from this point forward to maybe fix some spots that aren't as glowing. So Tyler's going to go through each grade level and show you a granular look at each grade level and what their aggressive growth, our typical growth looks like.
Yeah, so kindergarten, we're seeing really awesome growth. 70% when you talk about typical and aggressive. Really excited that early literacy foundation is being set up.
And that's a big flop. They've really been focused this year. We're very excited about the growth.
Next, first. First grade's at 78%. You'll see that especially I know it looks white, but that's actually supposed to be dark pink.
It's like a light pink, yeah. Yep.
59% are, I mean, our biggest growth is in that aggressive growth, which is really awesome. And so yeah, we're at 78% there. Second grade, a little bit less, but also when you look at, I think fall to winter, we saw the at-risk levels drop. So looking at 66% of second grade making typical or aggressive growth.
A ton of aggressive growth there too, yeah.
Third grade, 60% growth for them. And then fourth grade here, we're seeing, again, the aggressive growth. It's kind of cool to see that is the highest, 65% there. And then fifth grade is where we're feeling some feels. And we'll speak more to this in a few slides, but we have some thoughts, some concerns and areas that we're focusing on there.
No, it's good. Yeah. This is actually a very exciting slide. We took snippets of specific classrooms and teachers. You're not going to see the teachers' names or what grades they are to keep that private, but you can see that I always like to look for pockets of greatness and what is happening then in those classrooms and how can we spread that greatness. And what's exciting about this is that we have a range of teacher experience in this. We've got teachers that are just starting out, that are plunking out some amazing aggressive growth. And then we've got our experienced teachers that are really doing great. I mean, we have a classroom in our building where 89% of the kids are making aggressive growth. So these are really, really awesome things. I think overall it's helping us make that big growth that we're seeing, but we have some teachers that are really buckling down and doing the hard work, and it's showing. So I wanted to celebrate that. Wanted to take a little bit of a dive also into our ML population, our multi-language learners, and 66% of them are making that typical or aggressive growth, which is a great thing to see as well. I want to continue. That's not something we've really measured in the past, but I want to keep that going and see. Hopefully there's some growth there too. We've made a few tweaks to our programming, and I'm hoping to see that grow. So we really looked at what are we already doing. We made commitments in August as to what we're going to do to hopefully, create that perfect recipe for student success. And some of the things that we are already doing and we know are working are, we've identified our priority standards. So we're ensuring that teachers are focusing on those priority standards. That doesn't mean they don't teach all of them, but they're focusing really hard on mastery of the priority standards. We did add a supplemental phonics instruction piece called UFly to our K2. We have some third grade classrooms also that saw a need that are using it more in an intervention wise. And I think we're seeing some really good things. Really, it's really concrete, sequential, it's very focused, and we're seeing some good things out of that. We are making sure we're really focusing on our tiered intervention systems with the understanding that we can't intervene our way. So also really looking at tier one. What are we doing in tier one to differentiate instruction and make sure we're giving every kid exactly what they need at that level, but also what are we doing during our intervention time and making sure that the data that we're analyzing aligns with those priority standards and what they need. And then the last one is something that I feel like, super proud of, and I'm excited about it. We made it a commitment as a team in August to, in our master schedule on Wednesdays, everybody has committed to doing goal setting with their kids. So they're all looking at data, conferencing with each kid, and really looking at those progress monitors, tools, and are we making growth? Are we not? Why are we not? And having those conversations. And because it's so purposeful, I think it's making a difference. So we're going to keep those things. And then, like Tyler had said, especially fifth grade, we're focusing on that. That was one of our lowest areas of aggressive growth. So we've made some decisions around our instructional practices, and last month we took the leap, and our fifth grade team was super brave, and they are departmentalizing, which means we have a teacher that's just teaching ELA and social studies, and a teacher that would be just teaching math. We have 4 teachers in that grade level. But our reasoning behind that is we were finding that there's such a vast difference in need in classrooms. And in order to really focus in on that tier 1, we wanted to make sure that a teacher had the opportunity to just differentiate one content area and make sure that everybody's getting exactly what they need in those areas. So kids will have a math teacher and an ELA teacher, so they swap in the middle of their day. We'll see. You know, right now, I think that kids are liking it because they feel like it's preparing them for middle school. So that was one of the sells, you know. I think teachers are liking it because they're really, really excited about focusing in on one area. Yeah,
Did you say there's 4 classrooms?
there are 4 classrooms. Yep,
2 are math and 2 are ELA.
exactly. Yep,
And they kind of operate
yep,
as their
together.
pod.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah. And then the other piece that we are really excited to kick off is we are bringing Solution Tree in. And Solution Tree is an organization, and they are going to come in and help us focus on our PLCs. We have some really great functioning PLCs, but I thought I ran a great PLC. And I spent a little bit of time with Jeff, who was going to help us through this, and I thought, oh, nope, I was not. So I feel like we're all going to learn from this process, and the key thing that I'm hoping everybody gets from that is that we can identify priority standards, but if we don't have common assessments that align with those priority standards, and when I say common assessments, I'm not talking about a pre and a post. I'm talking about those little ones in between that you may even give weekly to say, oh, is this kid, how are they doing on this road to mastery of these standards? And then what do we do as a team to change our instruction and work if they're not getting it? So that is my hope that's coming out of that, to just get a little more granular. And then the last is to use our interims. If you know anything about SBAC, within that system, they have what they call interims, kind of practice tests. And we're really working on using those assessments as those common assessments. How do we get kids engaged in those so that when it becomes time to sit down and take that big test, that it's not a big scary test, that it's like, oh, been there, done that, and that we can really figure out,
Assessing the right things.
yes, assessing the right things and making sure that they can be successful. I know that there's ideas that you're teaching to the test. I truly believe that it's not teaching to the test. I truly believe it's giving them an opportunity to be successful when we use that to guide our instruction. So that is what we're doing.
Well,
Any
as having a
questions?
kid that is going through that right now in
Yes.
5th grade at Sand Hill, she absolutely loves that.
Well, that's great.
She really is excited when she gets to move around and different teachers. So it's amazing.
Good, good. I'm glad.
Our teachers seem to be feeling strong about it.
I
We
think
got
so.
Our math brain one, focusing on math.
Yes.
We also-
Yep. No, I think it's,
yeah.
you really can't truly diagnose what's going on, right? You gotta be willing to be brave and figure out, try to find that, what I like to call the perfect recipe. So I'm hoping that, this is the perfect recipe to help our 5th graders be, to get that growth. And I feel like the commitments that we're making this year are showing that the kids are getting what they need.
100%.
Yeah. Any other questions?
How long did you say you've been doing the interims so far? Is
The
that
interims?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. I would say in pockets of different grade levels, they've been doing them more so. Our assessment coordinator is here. She probably knows a little more than I do. But I think it's,
It's been about monthly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Our goal is monthly, and some grade levels have chosen to do that. Our commitment that we've made is that they'll do it each trimester. And so they've been doing that and then looking at that data with their students and planning instruction together in their PLCs.
good work there. I think our goal is to take the time, and it's always usually about time, right? But to take the time to align the interims with our priority standards. Like, okay, we're gonna live within this standard for 2 weeks. What interim would guide us in that? And we haven't done that work yet. That's our next step, though,
Yeah.
get there. So that it's just something we do all the time.
No, I love that idea of kind of taking away that scary big test every
Yeah.
once in a while. And, you know, I know you said you're not teaching to the test, but still we have to teach them how to take tests and take
It's a
away
very
that fear.
unique test.
Yeah.
Yes, and
So-
the rigor is there. And if we don't introduce them and have them live within that rigor, even at a time where it's not, I feel like if you goal set off that too, and you don't, it's not about being right or wrong, it's about learning why you made the mistake. That's where we're gonna see the growth. So using it and getting kids engaged in it and goal setting around it is I think, gonna be a game changer.
Yeah, I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, awesome, thank you.
Very good, thank you. So here's the part of the agenda. Do we want to take a 5-minute recess or not? It does seem quick.
Maybe you want to do
It
it
came
after
quick
my.
tonight, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could move it. Well, we want to just keep pressing.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Dana, superintendent update.
Awesome. So the first thing on my update is it's that time of year when I present to you our budget writing guidelines for the upcoming school year. This is a document that the superintendent in our district creates in response to our ends and executive requirements policies that are part of our board. The policies outline how the board and the superintendent work together. And so the structure comes from ER4, which is about budget planning, but really when we put together this document and I sit down with the district leadership team, with teaching and learning and with Dan, and we look at starting from zero, starting from what are the needs of our kids, what are the things that we are committed to as a board doing in teaching and learning, in meeting the needs of all kids. All of those things are built into this planning document. This is an outline of how my team and I will make the decisions to create a budget that we'll bring to the board for consideration and approval. And so some years the things that are in there are more stressful to discuss or to look at than others. But we always focus, we keep our priorities right now on the whole child, whole school, and the whole community. And to help us do that, some of the things we particularly look at when we're building the budget are where we have high poverty, are we making sure that we're meeting the needs of those student groups in those schools and in those programs? Where are our schools, where are they in school improvement status with the state? Do we need to put some extra or whatever we can of our resources differently in some buildings or some programs than others? And then, of course, what do our special populations of students need? So those are all part of how we develop our budget. But then having said that, in the big picture, we do set some basic outlines for what we're looking at. So for the coming year, we evaluate throughout the year what our enrollment trends are. We look at what we can project for the following year. This year, we had a report come in January, a follow-up report from Flow Analytics that we asked them to do because we noticed some big differences this year from what we expected. And so we do have that report. The board hasn't had time to go over it in detail because we just got it in January, and I want to have a study session. So we'll be sending that out for you to read. But we did share that already with our bond planning committee because there's some impacts into what they're looking at. But what we do see is we do see continued growth in the district, but at a slower rate than we expected. And over the next 10 years. And in that time, there may be a place or two where we actually see a decrease in the enrollment K through 12, excluding TK and Running Start. So the numbers that are in this budget are built based on TTK and Running Start not being counted as that number. So that's why that number looks different than the total number we might look at. Because this number consistently, we've been most effective when we pay particular attention, not just to the projections that we have and the demographic reports that we've had and looking at things over time, but really also using that January enrollment number as a predictor of the next year's average number. And so we are using January and the information we got from Flow Analytics and predicting that without TTK and Running Start, our enrollment next year will be 2,217 plus or minus 30. And I typically say plus or minus 50 when I'm doing this number projection for the following year. But because we are anticipating slower growth, I've condensed that. So we're not giving ourselves too much space, and we're being a little tighter in the predictions that we do so we can have a really solid budget in place and a really solid staffing level to support kids and staff as they come back for the following year. We are also going to do something a little bit different because of our concern about how some things happen. We had lower kindergarten enrollment this year than anticipated. So our elementary schools have their big kindergarten enrollment nights coming up. We're going to adjust that number after we see the response to those events as well. So that number could go a little bit one way or the other at that point in time as we prepare this budget for the board. So then we also have to pay attention to state apportionment. It's hard to do in the kind of a year, in the long session year that we are with the legislature, because we really need to build preliminary budgets to determine staffing levels for next year, probably before the legislature is going to finish their work. So the last day of the session, I think, is the 26th or the 27th, I think the 27th of April. There may be a special session. They may not get their work done by April, the end of April. We don't know for sure yet. But we know that if we have to make some decisions about decreasing staffing levels, we have to have that discussion with our bargaining units and with the board before that date. So we're going to have to use the numbers we have to determine budgets and staffing levels, and with a plan for how we adjust those if things come in healthier than we anticipate right now. And so you can see that that's noted here. We are also, for next year, because the levy did not pass in February, we still have a half a collection during next school year of the 2025 levy. So we will still have some levy dollars coming in next year that are part of this budget planning. However, any potential 2026 levy dollars are not part of this budget planning because we can't plan for dollars that we don't have committed yet. So that would be another place that we would, over the course of the budget planning late or even after the budget is approved, might have to make some adjustments. But we're trying to, as we do that, develop a plan that has a follow-up plan with what those might be so that the board and the district leadership has a starting place when we come to those discussions, because we expect that we will. So this year, as a result of enrollment that we didn't get where we thought we were going to be, our ending fund balance is not going to be ending where the board policy requires it to be at the end of the 2025 year. So this budget is also designed, our budget will also be designed to correct that with the decisions that we're making, so that when the board ends the 2026 year, the budget will be, the fund balance will be at the appropriate level according to board requirements. So then I'm kind of skipping over some things in here. I talk about the debt that the district will own currently. Our capacity, we're going down as we pay things off. So we are now at just about 20%. We will be in September of our capacity for bond or other non-voted debt at just about 21%. So the district, if in the future is considering a bond, there is the ability to do that. And so that we keep a really close eye on as we do this process. So I'm going to the rest of it is just kind of outline how we'll decide some things, but those are the big key points that we're looking at as we develop this budget right now.
Nice.
Any questions? I will, later in the agenda, when we talk about next meetings, I would like to suggest at that point in time that we schedule a study session to review staffing and budget planning for the March meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
On to the district academic winter update. Who do we got first?
All right. Good evening, board. We're here to look at our academic goals and our data update for the first half of the school year. We met in October and went over just kind of our upcoming goals for the school year academic-wise. And this is our second in kind of a series of three. I'll come back and present kind of how we ended up on our academic goals today. We're taking a really good look at a lot of our district assessments and where we are at just as a K-8 and then our 9-12 system for each of the different goals that we're looking for. So there we go. All right. We have some repeated slides here. First off, we always try to share what our 100% goals are and just keep looking at them every single time we do these presentations. So 100% North Mason students reading at grade level by third grade, 100% of North Mason seventh grade students meeting standard on SBA assessment in ELA and math, 100% of ninth grade students on track for graduation, and 100% of North Mason students graduate with 85% being on time. This is a repeat slide as well. I included it in our October presentation, but I think it's really important to always review. These are the different types of assessments that you would see in a school year. Today, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at that district and school level view. We won't be looking at the state summative because we don't have those state summative assessments until May. So that's something that I'll present on probably in June or July when we get our results from those state assessments. What we do have here, and Mrs. Collins, Mr. Lundy did a really good job of our K-5 presentation, so we could probably just skip that and go right to the middle school and high school instead. But no, they shared a lot about the FastBridge A reading, so we'll be looking at that screener. We'll be looking at our math diagnostic, and then when we get to the high school, we'll be looking at grades and credits and on track percentages for each of the high schools. A lot of what teachers use, and Jessica was talking a lot about this in the classroom assessment that we want to get really strong at, is looking at those common formative assessments. That's at that right there view that you see on this slide, and those are the assessments that we're doing frequently that are for learning compared to what we see with our district and state assessments, that those are the assessments of learning. Another quick review of our district assessment goals and then our SBA goals. These we shared in October. We want to see some really strong academic growth, and this is looking a lot at achievement. We want to see a pretty high increase in achievement for all of our students and each of our subgroups as well. This one right here, it mirrors what we have for the district assessment as well as the state assessment. We believe we have really strong district assessments that we use that should, in theory, mirror what the state assessment data tells us. So we would like to see 15% increases across the board in ELA, 10% increases across the board in math. And I talked about this in October. What the state as a whole and our district kind of matches the state is math is really tough to see those increases right now. So we put what we thought would be a really strong goal of a 10% increase. If we meet these goals, we'll be hanging banners sometime soon in our schools. So we still think they're attainable, but they are pretty lofty goals for us to reach. Okay, so like Sandhill presented earlier, we're going to talk a lot about our assessments that we're using at the district level. These two charts right here are showing our growth reports in FastBridge A rating. So we give this assessment K-8 for all of our students. It's a computer adaptive assessment. On the left is the 23-24 growth report, and on the right is this current year. Both comparing fall to winter. And this is really exciting to actually be able to show and share out. Those two columns on the far right are the typical and aggressive growth. And you can see that we had an 8% increase in aggressive growth compared to last year doing these exact same assessments. So this is something that we're really proud of, and it tells us how hard our teachers, our admin, everybody that's working in the building is doing for our kids. The next slide, this is more on the lines of achievement. So what we're looking at here is how well our students are doing on the assessment comparing on a national percentile scale. This shows the last 5 testing cycles, so from fall of last year, winter, spring, and then the last 2 on the right are fall and winter of this school year. What's kind of interesting is we see that high aggressive growth, but we still have kind of a dip in achievement. What as I kind of dug through and took a good look at, last year we didn't have K1 students do this assessment. The K1 students were doing a completely different assessment. This year we had them start doing the computer adaptive assessment, the A reading, and the percent of students in kinder and first grade that are above that 50th percentile are actually like 15, 17%. So it's bringing down the actual number that's above the 50th percentile. But they're also, those 2 grade levels are showing tremendous growth from fall to winter. So we're making gains. You can see if we were to pull this back 2 years, we still have a little dip always in the fall to winter. We're still trying to figure out why we see like a 2 or 3% dip between that fall and winter, and then it comes back up for the spring. But that's just where we're currently sitting for our K-8 FastBridge. This is our new assessment. We talked a little bit about this in October, the K-8 Math iReady Diagnostic. This particular assessment is also a computer adaptive assessment. It's done across kinder through 8th grade. It takes a little bit of time, kind of ranges between 25 and then for some of our students could be 60, 70 minutes to complete. How we have our kids doing it is they're breaking it up. Most of our teachers give them like a 20 or 25 minute block, and it might take a couple of days to complete this diagnostic assessment. This is a chart as a district we should be really proud of, because that number up there, 52%, that's towards the end of the year goal. So we are already surpassing what you would see. Then this assessment was done after about 65 instructional days. So we are overperforming what you would see typically in growth on the diagnostic assessment. That kind of shows up on the bottom as well. 25% of our kids, 25% of the 1,400 kids that took this assessment have already met their 1 year typical growth. So a quarter of our students right there have already met what you would expect to see in 1 year. On the far right is the stretch growth. That's like that same thing as aggressive growth, our gap closing, and 7% of our kids have already met the 1 year stretch growth. So these are pretty impressive numbers. I talked through it with an iReady consultant a couple weeks ago when they were in here, and they said those numbers for the stretch are really impressive because usually what you see is about a good goal is like 20 to 25% of your kids at the end of the year meet that goal. She said we're on track to hit like 35% of our kids meeting that stretch goal growth based on the percentages that we're seeing right here. She also talked to me about like the timing of the assessment. We decided to push this second assessment window up right before winter break. We didn't want to test them right when they got back from winter break. Made some sense to me. She also talked me through like some of our neighboring districts that are using assessment do it about 2 weeks after winter break. So it's just something, this is a brand new assessment. We can kind of play with the timing, but even with that, us doing it kind of early, we saw some pretty outstanding growth across the board for each of us. The one thing also to kind of note on the typical growth, it's fascinating. You see we have a big chunk of kids that made very little growth and a big chunk of kids that made really strong growth. So it's really trying to hone in our focus on that 29% that made very little growth on that first assessment as well. So that first chart, just like before, was growth. Now we're going into the actual placement data, and this is another graph that we should be very proud of. I want us to take a look at those numbers, especially in the red and checkered red. The bottom that's kind of a little bit faded is the assessment that was done in September, and we had 46% of our kids that took this assessment scored 2 to 3 grade levels below, or 2 or more grade levels below on that first time taking the assessment. When we retook it again in December, that number went to 33%. So a big chunk of our kids are moving in the right direction. This is really looking at how well they're doing on their current grade level standards. And you can see we had what would show as 11% of our kids that would be early on grade level or mid or above grade level. And then the second go around, 21% of our students. So a 10% gain of our students just in that little short time period. And what's really nice about this graph too is we talk about the percentage, but it shows right below the number of kids as well. So 30 kids were in that green to checkered green, and now we have 91 kids, and they're just in that 65 days of instruction. So very exciting data that we have here that we can share. That I think really speaks to the work that our admin and staff have really been doing with this data, talking through with their kids. Kind of moving into the high school. We have 2 charts for North Mason High School right here that, and I think Chad and Steve talk about this all the time. It's kind of unfortunate we end up looking at like F percentages when we talk through this, but a big goal of it is kind of the supports that they're building to decrease those F percentages. So what you see on this one is the grade comparison by class and the percentages of Fs by class for each. And the big focus over the last 2 years has been that freshman class of last year, so sophomores and freshmen. And you can see that those 2 are the ones that we're seeing the biggest decrease in class Fs between each of the others. The other ones are about the same percent, but you can see a pretty nice dip between each of those freshman and sophomore classes. This chart actually shows the amount of freshmen who are failing a class or a core class. And so this shows the failing one and then failing core by month. And you can see we have this kind of trend line where the percentage is pretty high on the failing a core class. So that's your math, your science, your ELA classes. That's what we're calling those core classes. And then a lot of intervention, a lot of supports happen as we get closer to the try, and then you see that big dip of the amount of students that are failing that core class. I know that our 2 principals at the high school are going to be talking about, we love seeing that dip when we get to the grade time, but how do we start shrinking the amounts that are happening right at the very beginning, right at December, January? How do we start lowering that number and still have the really good intervention at the end where we're kind of getting closer to under 10% of our kids that are failing one of those core classes? Last one here with some data, James Taylor HomeLink. So Lexi took a really good look at where each building was in comparison to their goals. So she pulled just kind of the credit update. So HomeLink, 47% on track overall, 67% MLL on track, and 75% students receiving special education services on track. James Taylor, 47% on track, 50% MLL, and then 25% of students receiving special education services are on track. She kind of noted in here as well that those percentages, as she was looking through the data, do show an increase by March, and then definitely towards the end of the school year as well. So before we have our principals, each of them have about 1 slide that they're going to go through with some action planning. And so what I've asked them to do is, you're going to see probably a lot of similar pieces that you saw at the very first part of the year. It's only been a couple of months, and we're seeing a lot of good growth, so we don't want them to do like wholesale changes if we're making positive gains. But there's definitely some things as they've been looking at this data ever since the second screener came in. And so there might be some pieces that they're doing some action planning around with their teams and adjusting as needed. So I'm gonna have Sandhill, which they basically shared a lot of that already, but here you go.
Ditto. No. So really going back to teaching those priority standards with Fidelity, continuing to focus on that instruction, that new phonics instruction, making sure we're looking at our data appropriately, our progress monitoring, making sure that we're getting that commitment in our master schedule around goal setting with each student. Each month, this is actually something that wasn't in the other one. Each month we have committed to, during our staff meetings, our 30-minute staff meetings, they're all around professional development and around our GLAD commitments and our UDL commitments. And so we have some teacher leaders that each month put together some amazing professional development and deliver that during our staff meetings. So that's been awesome too. 5th grade is departmentalizing, Solution Tree is coming in, and we're going to continue to focus on increasing the use of interims.
Very good.
So Belfair?
So good evening, everybody. Pam Klesman, principal at Belfair Elementary.
Christy Dolby, assistant principal.
So our action planning, this was actually really good when Christy and I started putting this down together. Our whole focus when we came in was really to start building that culture and knowing what the culture of Belfair Elementary was, so that we know how to grow going forward. So we started putting this together and we started saying, oh, but what about this thing that we're going to? And we decided we would wait and share that when we present in the spring, because that will be what we have decided to go forward with. So Christy's going to go through the items that we have been focusing on, and a lot of them are repeats as we've become more familiar with them ourselves and what that looks like, so that we know how to grow what we think that culture and that school should grow towards with the staff.
So we're implementing core instruction 5 days a week with Fidelity. So in order to do that, we're planning inclusive lessons that align core instruction, district-approved curriculum and supplements with grade level standards. We're beginning each lesson by reviewing the stated lesson language objectives, using student discourse strategies, so that's things like pair share, turn and talk, things like that, to engage students in academics to increase the use of academic language. We're using formative and self-assessment tools at conclusion of lessons. Second part is we're collaborating regularly in PLCs. So to do that, we're meeting weekly to look at student data and asking the following 4 questions. So we're asking, what do we want all the students to know and be able to do? How are they going, or how will we know if they learn it? How will we respond when some students don't learn it? And how will we extend the learning for the students who are already proficient at that? Then we're identifying priority standards and which assessment and instructional tools to utilize as grade level teams. And like Sandhill, we're bringing in Solution Tree to help with that PLC development. Third, we're implementing our WIN What I Need time 4 days a week to provide targeted small group intervention for 30 to 35 minutes every session. So our small groups are facilitated by our SPED, MLL, Gen Ed teachers with an emphasis on inclusion. And then our WIN cycles operate 4 cycles a year, so they're about 6-week sessions. So they're following grade level data dives. And at the conclusion of each cycle, so again, approximately that 6 weeks, the teachers meet in their PLCs and analyze all the data to identify the student growth and needs and modify new intervention groups.
Very good. Thank you.
Hawkins Middle School?
Good evening, Robert Callahan, principal at Hawkins.
Kevin Patterson, assistant.
So ours is actually, you might see it's a little bit different than what it was in the fall, and that was because we're not seeing the growth that we really need to see with our students over this time. And so we had to go back and sit down with our teachers and say, okay, what do we need to do? What do you need to do in class? What do we need to do to support you? What do the students need to do to show success? So this is what our PLC teams kind of put together in the different content areas of things that we're going to be committing to and working hard for the remainder of the school year. One of the things that we did was we looked at Hattie's research around positive instructional strategies, what the best bangs for the best buck in the class. And so a lot of the learning techniques, a lot of the strategies are coming right out of the research in order to implement into the classroom. The first one was really needing to have strong daily learning targets in the classroom, that the students know what they're supposed to be able to do by the end of that class. And not just the learning targets, but also targets that included the language component for our ML students and other students that really needed that academic support, core support. And I put a couple examples in there. For one of them is solve a system for linear equations algebraically and explain how to determine the solution to a system of equations without using a graph. And what this does, it not only communicates the expected learning for the day, linear equations, but it also reinforces the language skills by having the student use the math vocabulary in their responses. So if we can do not only that learning target piece of what they're learning, but also the language components, the vocabulary, it'll enhance and help the students remember that to move forward. The instructional strategies in here, such as cooperative learning, vocabulary instruction, think, pair, share, thinking maps, those are all different strategies that we want to be seeing teachers do in their classrooms. And so one of the ways that we're reinforcing that is by doing our own admin walkthroughs for checking on the fidelity of the teachers using these strategies in the classroom. And this works in two different ways. One, it pairs what we see in the classroom so that when we're evaluating teachers, we kind of see things the same. But on the other one, it also kind of communicates to the teachers, what are the things we're expecting to see? And so when we go in, we just check off the type of learning activities we're seeing. We write down their learning target, we write down their language target, and then we share that with them later and allow them to have discussions about, well, how could this be better? How could we improve through that? And so we do this about 2 or 3 times a week in order to get this out to all the teachers. One of our biggest targets this year is really kind of supporting our ML students in their learning, and specifically in the area of math. We decided to go ahead and have all of our ML students that were in the lower end with a WIDA rating of 1 or 2 to also be in a math intervention class to support their language acquisition for math. So they have their regular math class and a math intervention class. And this has actually been probably one of the strongest interventions we've done this year. Currently, our ML students are showing the highest growth in the iReady scores in the school. And right now, we're already ready to move 3 students out of the interventions at the trimester, and we have identified some students that need to move in for some more intervention supports. We have one of our things the last couple of years we're doing is our advisories in order to support our students around the SEL learning with our Character Strong program. And we incorporated this year the ideas of digital citizenship. One of the things we've really noticed over the last several years is students having difficulty knowing what are the norms and acceptable things to do with the technology that we've given them. And so bringing in digital citizenship classes to help them understand that tool and what they type in there may be representative of what they really think or not. But we're also looking at bringing in regular academic interventions into that advisory class so that we can start targeting some of our students that aren't being supported in the ML or not being supported with the special education resource areas to get extra math and language arts supports as well. The math teachers themselves have been doing some great learning around the new program and have been using the MyPath as an everyday intervention for students. It's targeted right at where those students are scored at, and they regularly look at that data on a weekly basis. And what they've started doing is using those iReady scores as reward-based systems in the class, putting up charts of where kids are so that they can start seeing some success and start celebrating that success in the classrooms. And that attitude of the students have really kind of changed over the last month or 2 of doing that. We've continued to do our after-school math support for tutoring for kids 2 days a week. We also have opened that up to kids if they want to come in and start getting help in any other classes as well. We got the SBA coming up, and one of the things that we're trying to think about is how can we help support the SBA to be more effective with the students so they're not, so that our structure isn't hindering them in being successful in the SBA. And so we've made some adjustments to what the schedule looks like, to expand the time that they're going to be available for the testing, that we have more targeted support for students that need pull-out or individual testing. And so there's less interruption for them during that time. And then, of course, really focusing more on our PLC collaboration like we have the last several weeks and months, looking more specifically at our students in their classes individually that are scoring below a 2 or less in their core classes, especially in the language arts and reading and math classes, and assigning special interventions for those students that are meaningful individually. Not everybody needs to have the extra time, but that maybe some can have that extra online support. And so we're really looking at that and using the PLCs and, as ways to look at that data and make determinations.
Very good, thank you.
Mason High School.
Good evening, Board. Chad from the high school. Steve? Sounds like a morning talk shows. When we presented in October, these were kind of our big plans for the year. So our plans haven't, change in education takes time, and we've only been doing it 4 months. We are seeing some gains, as you can see from the failure rates dropping. We know we have more work to do, but we're continuing our going AVID building wide, holding our departments accountable for their AVID commitments. We have still have after school tutoring for students that need assistance or need to stay after and make up a test. They work with our discipline secretary who coordinates with the teacher. A big change we're going to be doing here in the spring is we're going to be adjusting our state testing schedule, and we think it's going to make a difference in our results and help our building. We're going to make it kind of a big deal. In the past, we just pull the kids out of class, take them to the library, and they do this state assessment. Those kids are missing first instruction. So you pull kids out of class, teacher struggles because, should I move on? I got half my class gone. We need to get away from that. So we're going to adjust the schedule. We're going to be doing testing for the kids that have to take the test. Essentially, we're going to do a 2-hour late start, but every kid will show up, and we're going to have things for them to do. Freshmen will be going to math tutoring, ELA tutoring. So we think it's going to be a benefit to our students on how they perform on the test.
Upperclassmen that drive, they can wait a little bit if they don't need to take the test, or if they don't need that intervention. Yeah, we don't celebrate yet, but there's different things built in for every grade, so.
Still coming in the picture, we're still working on the details, but we're excited about it. And continuing our PLC collaboration. We don't have Solution Tree coming in to help us with our PLCs, but we do provide grade distributions each trimester, midway through the trimester and at the end of the trimester, and have departments look at their grade distribution. It's by teacher. Teachers that have a high rate. Steve and myself are having crucial conversations with those teachers, trying to get them some support. And that's the power of the PLC. If you have someone in your department that is having pretty good success with all their kids, other teachers in that department can learn from them. So we're trying to strengthen that.
And then we saw freshman success going this week. We'll meet with those freshmen, kind of try to give them a little push as they get into finals, that last little boost of get everything done. Our counselors have done a great job of meeting with every class. They hold them in the auditorium during Wednesdays. I see Emily nodding her head, that's awesome. And it's been fun to have freshmen come out of there talking about transcripts. The things freshmen choose to talk about is not always transcripts. So it's really cool to have them have that, and then they're running up to us, showing us their GPA, or look what I got, that's what I have. So it's cool to see them looking forward with the plan, and so that'll obviously be part of our talks this week. You know what your transcript is, you know these classes matter, now you've seen one, so I think that will help with our conversations. We're also, the springtime, this is where you start building your master schedule for next year. So we're looking at, we had meetings this morning about what can we do to improve these numbers? How can we target some certain areas and change some things that we do in the master schedule and kind of get creative with some ways to add more options for kids to get that core instruction right away. And then our monthly data dives, the grade distribution comes out like every 6 weeks. They get the midterm and then they get the finals. This one comes out every month, and so we can see right away what's going on. We pull, obviously the grades are on there, you see them by grade. I mean, it breaks down as specific as you want it to, by teacher, by anything on there. And so we spend a lot of time going through that, again, so we can either try to target and have meetings with people, figure out what's going on, or if we see a big, shining, thing of positive, we can share that also. So that's really, spend a lot of time with our monthly data.
Thank you.
I do have a question.
Emily.
For the master schedule, I know that the middle school implements advisory, and I'm pretty sure when I went, it was like pause, so it was just like homeroom. Would there be any way in the high school that you could get an advisory class every day for at least like 10, 20 minutes? Because I find myself booked with work and school, and I don't have time all the time to do homework, and having built-in homework time daily would complete my stress levels or like lower them.
Is there a possibility? Yeah, but there's some give and take. We take away, we would be taking away instructional time from teachers to have that every single day. So we have to weigh that.
Okay.
That was part of the conversation this
Today.
morning, though. That is one of the things of what would advisory, what are the pros and cons, and we're definitely looking into it.
So does the high school not have a WIN class like the middle school, like the What I Need class?
Their schedules are kind of what I need. So their
Yeah.
schedules are
Yeah,
built on what they
right.
need to get across
Yeah.
that stage in June or wherever they're targeted to go. So
Yeah, because I know
that's
that was what my son did, was catch up on homework when I
Yeah.
could get him to
We
catch
do have
up on
credit
anything when
recovery
he was
class
there.
built in,
Yes.
one
Yeah.
section each trimester. So a lot of students need that. So
Yeah.
And we have homeroom on Wednesdays.
Yes.
So that's kind of our advisory, and it's one day a week
Oh,
where
okay.
we do some of our social emotional stuff. And if they don't have a social emotional activity, they can go, I need to make up a math test, or I need to make up this
Oh, yeah.
test. But it's just not every day, like Emily was saying.
Yeah.
And-
When you say there's no time in the instructional, so I don't remember, Dan, if it was you that said this, forgive me, but we were talking about the number of graduation credits and saying that by making it lower, we were sort of allowing students to have more opportunities to fail because they've got plenty of time to make things up. And that if we possibly increase the number of graduation credits or credits required to graduate, that might make students sort of, oh, man, I have less time.
And I think that's part of the discussion. The high school and the district team are considering a lot of things about how do we grow our culture for success. And so all of those are ideas that they're going to talk about and maybe bring something to the board to recommend. Our current schedule is set up so that there is some grace in it for students who struggle at the beginning or sometime during their career and don't pass all their courses. That is not the case in every high school schedule. And so that there were really deliberate decisions that were made by the board and the school at the time they made that decision. The building leadership and the district leadership is considering, are there different or recommendations they want the board to think about and discover and discuss in the future. And there may be some, but I think they want to take a really measured and thoughtful approach to thinking about anything that they want to start a conversation with the board about, because the board does set policy about how our schedule, kind of how many credits, well, not necessarily how our schedule is set up, but how many credits we're going to make available to students and how many we're going to require for graduation if it's more than the state required Core 24, which ours is. And then also some decisions about things like grading policies and and ways kids achieve grades. So all of those, we already have policies that you have said about. And I think our leadership team is really being thoughtful and thinking about, are we taking the most advantage of all those things we already have available for us? Are there things that we want to suggest doing differently? But they're kind of just starting that conversation to bring that to you. The benefit of our current schedule is that the students do have grace if something happens or life, whatever, and they are not successful at some point during their high school career, they do have some grace. But there are a lot of other things we can consider as part of that, and one of those things might be, do they have too much grace? Do we want to tighten that up so that helps people feel a sense of urgency? But I think our team is involving a lot of people into, they just started the discussion, but plan to involve a lot of stakeholders before they bring anything to the board if there are any changes that they recommend.
Okay, yeah, it would be seeing the percentage, and I know, and Chad, thank you for reminding us that you brought us some ideas, both of you, in October, and it takes a while to see these through. But the ninth grade Fs, that data is still pretty concerning, and I'd hate to give our students, here's more requirements to get you to graduate when you're a freshman who's failing 1-2 classes. You're just, it's overwhelming. I mean, I can only imagine, it's so daunting to think, I have even more now that I need to do, that I need to accomplish to be successful.
Right. And so that's a big part of that conversation that they're having is that even the right thing to consider? What we need to consider is what supports we need to have in place for staff to help them support kids so that those numbers can be smaller. And I know that their team, or maybe someday disappear. They've been really deliberate at the high school at looking at, okay, here's where we are, and we know there's some things we want to change. Just like Jessica talked about at Sand Hill, as we make tweaks and see what works, then we can decide to go further somewhere or pull back and go in a different direction. And I really value the work that our team is doing in that area.
I wanted to add to what I was finishing that thought. Part of that, before the first thing I mentioned, that 2-hour late start, by having all the kids there, I think that's a really positive distraction. I think that's going to be that's a cool, I don't know, kind of seems a little out of the box a little bit. So I think that kids will respond to that. And Nicole is saying there, I'm concerned about the, bringing up the the credits and whatever. I can't wait to see what you come up with on that. I want to hear what you guys, actually I want to see what the students have to say about it and what their concerns are. And maybe not just as a collective, but maybe if they have a forum or something that we get invited to or something like that, it'd be really cool to see their actual physical emotions, to see that. And then I'd like to see what your explored benefits of raising it or lowering it or whatever, what the benefits are both ways
I don't think they're really very far along, if even considering that's
that's what I'm saying. If that's something brought to us, those are the things
we
that
had
I'd like to
we
see.
had an hour and a half meeting today on this topic.
Yeah, well, and this is
today.
a great time to add that. Those are the things that I'm really excited to see in that students, and then benefits on both sides. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
And it might not be that. They may come with something completely different.
Yeah,
So
I'm
that
totally
was
against
just-
it. That's
there
what I
were
want
a
to hear.
lot
Copy.
They've had a lot of ideas. They've
Yeah.
had a lot of input from other people.
Yeah.
Other staff, students, families. Everybody has an idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No,
we're
it's
at the
ambitious.
very
You
initial
know, it's
stages of
great,
considering if we're
but
doing anything else or
I
different.
don't know.
Yeah.
Great.
Just to add on to what Dana said and how the trimester gives a lot of grace to kids that fail, it doesn't give a lot of grace to the high cap kids, because I'm in pre-calc right now and I am swamped because it's supposed to be a 3-trimester class, and the week before winter break, we did a unit a day, and that's a lot. In that, it crowded my brain, and then we had to take the test and postpone it till after break so kids could actually learn it, and the test not be just to fail. And I just say like the 3-trimester schedule or the whatever credits, it doesn't give a lot of grace to the high cap kids as well, because I can't take as many classes as I want because the teacher doesn't teach it at that given class. But I have my AP class and it's during that class. So it's just like it seems like a lot of classes block out with each other.
That's good feedback.
That's it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
James Taylor.
All right, good evening, and I am happy to report that 47% is now 65. And we end term Monday next week, so it'll be even higher come Thursday when I get some grades. So some of the things that we are working on, we are starting our Student of Hope intervention meetings. And these are when we are noticing that students are not making progress, that we're bringing their families in, we're bringing their IEP case manager in, with the counselors, the teachers, myself, and we're figuring out what their barriers are to learning and seeing how we can be proactive and eliminate those in our buildings. And with some of the feedback we've been getting, some of the students are like, well, I did this. And the teacher would say, no, this is what I wanted. So there was some unclear communication there. So we are working with our MBLC coach with Great Schools Partnership, and we are developing feedback systems for grading and assessment building and planning. So students know exactly what's going to be assessed exactly at what time throughout their courses. And sometimes the way we do things right now, it could be 2 or 3 a day. But that feedback is continuous, it's meaningful. Students always have a chance to go back and revise. So they might not have earned a credit for study skills at the beginning of the year. Well, you got to have an organized binder all year for all of your classes. So once you've hit that mastery and you can say in culinary, here is all of my stuff, I have organized it, I've met all of the learning criteria, we can go back and grade change and earn that half credit. So that's typically why we see, like at the middle of the year, we're kind of like, our data's not that great. And they always kind of pull it out by March, April, May. We really see students figuring it out, and with the revision and showing mastery of their learning, they're able to go back and re-earn those credits. On Fridays for our PLCs, we just started these last Friday with our MBLC coach. We are doing lesson plan feedbacks sessions with our PLC. So a teacher will provide their lesson for the week or their plan, and we'll be able to go read through it and provide feedback or ask clarifying questions, or look at the standards they're teaching and kind of look at the assessment and really make sure that they are aligned, because we don't want to be assessing students on standards we're not teaching. So we're being really intentional on that work. And then to go back to our Students of Hope intervention, sometimes that means a change in placement. So if we have students that are not thriving in HomeLink online, because it's really hard to learn at home on your own, and the Edmentum curriculum is pretty rigorous, we work at bringing them in building at James Taylor, so they have that teacher support and they can still do Edmentum classes or join the cohort depending on the credits that they need. If attendance is a barrier to be in person, sometimes we'll move them back to HomeLink. That doesn't happen very often. Once in a while it does. Or we move them to our evening program, which we're actually capped at 30, so we're full this year for our evening students. And unfortunately, sometimes that means students exit out of our program based on the ALE requirements we have to follow, and we have had to do that with a couple students this year. But we are significantly less in the amount of students that we have exited. Last year, we moved quite a few MLL students out of HomeLink into either James Taylor day or evening. And we have learned that really if students have a WIDA score of less than a 3, HomeLink is not the best fit for them. So we're starting to gather that information and using that when we are placing students. And now we have that application process where we are intentionally placing kids into the best fit program for them, not the asked for program by them. And we are seeing a lot more retention in all of our students. So come May, you will see those numbers much higher.
A couple questions.
Sure.
For so with the feedback system, is that with the coach and with yourself, or with, like, who's on that team that's giving that feedback to the teacher?
So it will be for myself, it's from the students, and it is from our coach. Our coach will look at our student feedback and then work with the teacher and redesign assessments or recheck for clarity. And now this MBLC session, each of our teachers have kind of a daily checklist that aligns to the competencies of our profile of a graduate and aligns this learning standard to each standard. So students will check, I've met it or not yet, and then create a plan for if not yet, how are they going to meet it to get that done for the day. And if it doesn't happen for the day, that's okay. You have until the end of the year to get it done. But they do have to meet it to earn that credit.
And then when you were mentioning about students having to exit because of ALE standards, what does that look like?
So students have to stay in ALE, they have to be working on average of 27.5 hours a week. That's kind of their attendance. And they have to be passing their courses. Typically it's every 3 weeks. That's going to end up changing for James Taylor Day because our sessions aren't every 3 weeks anymore. But per ALE, we can't count you as full FTE if you are not making adequate progress, and it's not right for the student to keep them in a program where they're not being successful. We want to move them to a program where they're going to find some success. All right, thank you.
Very good,
Thank you.
All right, and to kind of sum up here, one thing I was just listening and trying to take in is we don't want our buildings just to throw changes out there just to throw changes out there. So as you're seeing some kind of similarities to the beginning of the year as well, we did some really intensive meetings at the end of last school year and at the beginning of this school year, and we talked about it in October to really focus in on that core instruction. Our elementaries talked about that win time. We've actually asked them to kind of shrink that win time down quite a bit and really focus on that tier 1 instruction. We wanted to make sure that students were getting the amount of time needed and necessary in that tier 1 first instruction. Especially we have new curriculum in our K-8 as well. So there's been a lot of heavy lifts at the start of the year. You're hearing a lot of maybe some minor tweaks based upon some data that each of the buildings are seeing. But we, like Chad had said earlier, we're playing the long game, and we want to continue to see good progress and make tweaks as needed to really support our student learning. So some of the district summary, our action planning, you kind of heard it through a lot of the pieces with some of the PLC emphasis. So even in our district directed days, we have one coming up here shortly. That's going to be a really common formative assessment, PLC focus, where teachers are going to dig into, we have a Teams drive where they have all their priority standards and their assessments and really just kind of analyze where they're at as a team. Like I said, our K-8 math, they have a whole new curriculum. We haven't updated that page since they got the new curriculum. So there's some pieces in there that they're going to have to really take a good look at. So this is why the high schools and middle school did not have Solution Tree coming, is we do have some OSSI grant money for each elementary school, and that's where Solution Tree kind of came in. I don't want them to feel left out. We have plans for them with Solution Tree kind of going into next year as well, where we want to get our leaders a lot of training and development with Solution Tree and PLCs. Also looking at with our OSSI grant money, some writing supplemental materials at some of the buildings, and then we actually have a consultant in Pathways. You've kind of heard a little bit about that program that's at Sand Hill. We have a consultant that's helping support kind of growing that classroom. She was, I believe, there today actually, working with staff. Today we also had Desmos training for our middle school teachers for math. So we're really, from the middle of the year on, just trying to get as much professional development for our teachers, especially with the new curriculum. And we had this set up, but weather got wonky in February. But Kim Weaver, who I believe she's a director at OESD for STEM, she does a really cool AI, and she's fantastic fantastic to listen to and really learn from. I had her come out when I was a principal in another district and work with my staff quite a bit. And there's some AI components that she wants to work with, just teachers around our ESD. And then I'm going to be a part of that mastery-based learning. So that last little piece is some with me. I'm going with Lexi and really trying to learn from the work that they're doing at James Taylor and HomeLink. So to kind of sum up, you heard a lot from our buildings. I know that we have a lot of hardworking individuals, teachers, staff, administrators that are really trying to support kids the best they can. And hopefully you're able to see some signs of really good growth academically that each building and each part of our district is working towards. So any questions?
I just really appreciate all of this data and this maybe you're touching in. It's been good.
Absolutely. I second that. It's a lot of work, and you bring one slide, and how much is in that slide it's a lot. It's incredible. So I really appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right, thanks.
Really appreciate it. Does anybody need to take a break right now? All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 7:50.
Oh, man. I think I'm gonna
So there's Dan. You are up, sir.
The Dan.
All right.
Yeah, same.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan King, the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations. And I'm here tonight to present the budget status report, beginning with the status report for our other funds, our fund balances through the month of January, so through January 31st of 2025. And our capital projects fund balance was $359,908, an increase of $7,595. The debt service fund ended with a fund balance of $727,151, a decrease of $150,757. The ASB fund ended with $426,419, a decrease of $5,871. And the transportation vehicle fund ended with $183,481, a decrease of $447,204. That's because we paid an invoice for 3 new buses. Moving on to the attendance, and this is our February enrollment. So our counts for February are our budgeted FTE is 2,283.55, and that was an adjusted enrollment that we did in October. So that's our revised budgeted. Our February 2025 FTE was 2,293.92. And this includes Running Start. We had 77 Running Start students. And if you remember what Dana mentioned during her budget guidelines, if you subtract the Running Start students and the TTK, and TTK is not included here, it's 2,217 students. Our year-to-date average is 2,288.65. And we had 34 students in TTK. And when we count our TTK in all of this, our enrollment was 2,327.92 students. So let's move on to our budget status report for the general fund through January 31st, 2025. Beginning with revenues. So our total revenues actual year to date, they're on the top left, were 38.63% of what we budgeted for the year. And the projected year-to-date revenues for that time period was 38.74, so we're pretty close. Our local source revenues actual through January, we're at 39.92%. And the projected year-to-date local revenue sources was 39.76, so we're a little bit above there. State source revenues actual year-to-date were at 39.08%, and the projection was 38.73. And then for federal revenues, the actual year-to-date were at 29.87%, and the projected year-to-date federal sources was 37.84. So we're not quite there with the federal in terms of what our projection is, but we've gotten a lot closer. We've come from very, very far behind. And as we continue to do grant claims in the federal categories, we're catching up there. The top 10 sources of revenues are listed below. I'll go over the top 5 here. Apportionment at $9,904,351 through January. Special purpose unassigned at $3,957,703. Local property taxes collected, $1,553,813. Special purpose OSPI unassigned, $1,053,956. And transfers, these are transfers in, and if you remember, we did a transfer from the debt service fund to the general fund, and this is showing right here, $162,307.
Where is the levy? Which one is that?
That's in the taxes.
Local
The
property.
local property
Okay.
taxes. Mhm. And then the next page shows the big picture for our revenue. So we had budgeted $44,006,687. Our projected year-to-date general fund revenues for this time period was $17,052,475, and our current year-to-date are not too far behind that, $17,004,016. And I think since we did the revision to our enrollment for apportionment, this is actually pretty good. This is pretty good considering we made that, we were about 76 students lower than we had budgeted. And we did not change our budgeted revenues for our budget. So, so we're actually doing pretty good in that regard. So looking at our expenditures, our budgeted year-end balance as a percentage of budgeted expenditures is at 2.56%. And our total expenditures actual year-to-date, 42.25% of what we budgeted. And we projected that we'd be at 41.3. So you can see our expenditures are exceeding the projected by a little bit, not by a lot in percentage-wise, but in dollars-wise, it does make a difference. Salaries and benefits actual year-to-date, 40.17. Our projected 40.57. So we're not too far off there. And then basic education actual year-to-date, 41.78%, and we were at 41.67. The top 10 expenditures by program include basic education at $8,562,712, district-wide support at $3,120,061, special education supplemental state at $2,263,134, vocational basic state at $886,772, and pupil transportation at $855,907. Those are the top 5. You can see the rest there, and those top 10 expenditures altogether make up 94.64% of all of our expenditures. And when we look at the big picture for expenditures, we budgeted at the beginning of the year, actually in August, $44,524,338. When we did the adjustment to our enrollment for apportionment, we did not go back and change our budgeted expenditures, and there's a reason for that, because we need to make sure that if we're to do that and we ended up bringing those down, we need to do a budget resolution for that. And also then if it turned out by the end of the year we were going to exceed that, we need to go back and do another budget resolution. So we don't want to exceed this amount we budgeted for the year, or we would need to do a budget resolution. So our goal is to keep our budget expenditures as low as possible and not exceed this. Our projected year-to-date general fund expenditures were at $18,387,324. And our current year-to-date general fund expenditures were $18,810,107. So you can see we've exceeded where we ought to be year-to-date wise. And that's something that we're working on. That's why we're working on some strategies to try to make up for that. Also, it's important to note that our revenues are usually catching up to our expenditures. A reason is, one, our apportionment is not evenly distributed across the year. So we have to remember that. Okay. Also, we have to know that some of our grants we get reimbursed for. So we spend the money first, then we get reimbursed. And so it's pretty hard to always have your expenditures and revenues match at any given point in time. The goal is by the end of the year, through all of the processes that we do with our spending and our reconciling all of our expenditures and revenues throughout the year, that we come out within our budget at the end of the year. Now, our special education funding is summarized on the next slide. So we have really essentially two different programs that we use. Programs meaning accounting programs in our account codes. We have program 2100 and program 2400. 2100 is our state allocation and 2400 is our federal allocation. The federal allocation is through grants, and we make claims on those. So we spend those dollars first, and then we claim the money as a reimbursement to catch up. So 2100, though, is an allocation that we receive in our apportionment each month. So our yearly allocation in program 2100 is $4,768,907.89. Our revenues through January 31st, 2025, $1,883,718.61. Our expenditures were $2,260,390.96. And you can see there's a difference between our revenues and expenditures of $376,672.35. In the federal program 2400, our allocation is $544,444. The revenues through January were $145,718.82, and our expenditures were $168,415.82. And the difference there is $22,697. So that gives you a picture of where we are with our special ed funding. And this is something we've been tracking since the beginning of this fiscal year. And I think it's a good idea to kind of keep a look at that, especially since this is one of the areas where we are, all advocating, all districts in the state, that our state legislatures and our state funds special education in a stronger way so that we can really meet the needs of our students and match our actual costs.
So just for clarity there, Dan, as you look at that chart and you see the difference between the revenues and the expenditures, those are the amounts then we have to claim for the dollars that we've spent so far. So when those come back, those will go into our fund balance.
Right.
Another area too is we do have costs that we have some high need students that we do incur some additional costs, and there's a process called special education safety net that we can use to reclaim back some of those excess costs in special education, and we don't get those until July and August. So, okay, let's move on to the month-end balances. This shows our fund balance year-to-date through January at $598,847. And our budget year-end balance was $2,204,491. And so, as Dana mentioned, we are working on some strategies to help bring this up. And each month we see this changing and moving. When you look at our December, our December fund balance was $688,112. And then you look at our January at $598,847. It appears that it went down, but in actuality, our cash flow actually increased. The cash on hand at the county treasurer went from $475,000 to $854,000. The fund balance shows that there's a lower fund balance because we do have some liabilities. Basically, that is, we have encumbered some money in invoices that are not yet paid. So when we pay those, then those actual expenditures will be recorded. But they're still recorded here in the fund balance because they're liabilities. Because we take your total assets minus your liabilities and you get your fund balance. Some of those liabilities include our insurance that we pay in monthly installments, larger invoices for different things that we don't pay all at once. We have permission with those vendors to pay it in installments, but we still record those as liabilities.
Question for you on that, Dan. So I know most corporations will either work in what they call a net 30 or net 90, right? So is that what you're kind of referring to there?
Yes, we want to make sure we're always in good standing with our vendors, and if we have an invoice for something, we pay it on time. But when we're allowed 30 days or 60 days without any kind of penalty, or if, for example, our insurance is $720,000 for our premium. For a district of our size to pay that in one payment would not really be very helpful for us as we strategize and use our resources. And so we have an agreement with them to break it up into monthly payment. Well, I think we have 5 monthly payments for that. But even then, it's still a large invoice, each of those payments. And we have similar agreements with other organizations as well.
That's corporately, that's extremely common. I kind of wanted to highlight that within the agenda, there is a budget financial report that lists every single transaction that the district makes every single time. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that that is the transparency of what the district is spending. And that is the place to look. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was fully aware of that. So, but
That's right.
Great job, Dan. Appreciate you.
True.
Are there any further questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
And I saw the line on the graph marking 0, so thank you.
I remembered you had asked for that, so I made it nice and dark so we can all see that clearly.
I appreciate that, thank you.
So this resolution for emergency repair,
Yeah, I want to start before I let Dan explain to you. So as you know, our district looks for ways to fund our needs outside in as many different ways as we can without asking our community for additional funds. We have already in the last year applied for an emergency grant for the emergency repair pool when we had the things happen with the water system over the summer. But we also have some concerns about the effectiveness of the emergency sound system at Sand Hill. And although we've built other options as how long-term we could address that, we really wanted to look at how to do that in the short term for safety reasons. So Dan and Joan applied again to the emergency repair pool and were successful. And you want to go ahead and talk about that?
Absolutely. So, we did recognize that the PA system not functioning properly, it's somewhat functional, but not wholly functional at Sand Hill Elementary. They have different ways of communicating, so I don't want to worry people. the administrators have a way to communicate with all of the staff when there's an emergency or they need to make sure that they get a message out. But they have to use different means of communicating to make sure that they reach all the areas. Our goal is to have one viable communication system that's heard loud and clear across the entire building and all the portables and the exterior of the building for regular announcements, as well as in the event of an emergency and you need to make sure you get some information out immediately. So recognizing that as an urgent need, we applied for the emergency repair pool grant, and within 24 hours, we got accepted. It was pretty remarkable.
That's great.
Because I believe our state leaders also recognize the need for school safety and how a communication system is really important for school safety. And so we submitted the grant. The amount is $151,634.41. That is the bid we received. And I'm assured that that is the true cost of this project. And the emergency repair pool grant will fund that amount only and no more than that. And it's a reimbursable grant. So once we complete the project, we submit the invoices and we get reimbursed for it. So this resolution then declares the need as an emergency, the need to have a viable, working, consistent communication system, AKA a PA system at Sand Hill, and that the district will follow all of the applicable public works requirements and use these funds only for the PA system. And once this resolution is approved, if it's approved tonight, we can begin with scheduling that work to happen tomorrow. We'll call the vendor and have it scheduled.
Very good.
I make a motion that we approve and adopt Resolution 2G25 Emergency Repair Pool as presented.
All right, I've heard a motion. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor of this resolution 02G25 emergency repair pool? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. None of, hearing any opposed? All right, hearing none, that is approved. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Arla,
Yes.
legislative rep.
The legislative session is underway. I know Dana's been doing great work. I get lots of emails from different people about the various bills, so I'm just gonna highlight from this email I got today about 3 key Senate bills. You know, they're calling the big 3 issues are the supplies and operating costs, special ed, and transportation. And so these particular bills have advanced further through and were heard in Senate Ways and Means. Senate Bill 5192 for MSOC, that's the, you know, supplies and operating costs funding boost, proposes a 10% increase in funding for those types of costs. It feels like that bill has strong bipartisan support. Senate Bill 5263 for special education funding would increase the multiplier and removes the 16% cap. Senate Bill 5178 is related to pupil transportation reform. It adds $400 per student who is unhoused, needing special transportation, adds to that. And then House Bills 1338 related to MSOC and House Bill 1310 related to special education have had public hearings, were moved into the House Appropriations Committee as well. So they're all awaiting executive action in their respective fiscal committees and are expected to move out of those committees by the Friday cutoff. Do you have anything you want to add about what you're hearing?
No, we heard that as well, and in fact, I think most of them have fiscal committee hearings as of late this afternoon scheduled either for Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
So we're feeling pretty confident that those things will move forward. Anything that wouldn't make the fiscal cutoff that the legislature determines later on to be necessary to the budget, they can revive during the process. But we are really feeling positive about these particular bills moving forward and allowing us to have some really good information about what that will mean for us looking into next year.
And it's closed now, right? No new bills can be brought on now?
Yeah, well, there was a new one that related to some other information that was introduced last night, so, but it is something that could be necessary to the budget, so those actually could be, but typically, last Friday they had to be out of the policy committee in the House of Origin and moving on towards Ways and Means or Finance or. And this Friday, they have to be out of the financial committee in the House of Origin, so that starting next week, they can go to the other house. And then they can start negotiating where, like with special ed and MSOCs, there's a bill from both houses where they put those together to come up with one law that gets passed, and so.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's trucking along. I do have, I think it's St. Patrick's Day. I plan to go to Olympia with some other ledge reps in the area, and we'll see what comes of that, but that's always a good time to visit since, yeah.
Very cool.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Arla.
All right. So moving on to the adjournment. Or no, sorry, no, wait.
Monitoring report.
I got it already down.
You got a little excited there.
No, I just like start moving it down. Okay, monitoring reports.
Almost.
So I will entertain a motion to talk about ER9 communication with the public.
I move that we talk about it. I actually had something here. I don't know if that wording was right.
Fine.
I move that we find the superintendent's performance to comply with ER9.
All right. Heard a motion on ER9. Is there any discussion?
I would have something here. I see that we moved policy review into the consent agenda. That I paid attention, but then I didn't pay attention. There's something in 5010, policy 5010. I know it's back there. But there's something in there, there's some wording.
So, hold on, Leanna. We got to talk about ER9.
Oh, first I was going to say, we have right here saying it's assurance of organizational performance and policy review.
But
Isn't
that's
that
reviewing
policy review?
these policies, not what's in the consent
Oh, okay.
agenda.
I thought we were still saying that we were talking about that.
No,
But we
no.
moved it up, so, okay.
Nope.
But after we do that one, can I comment here about a couple of words in that, even though we have it up there? This is the first time that it's moved.
No,
Right?
no, it's
Don't we
always
usually
been
have
in
a
the-
review
They've always
afterwards?
been, the numbered policies have always been in the consent agenda. So, so typically.
No, you're right.
This is where we review the policy governance policies and my reports on the performance of the district and myself on the things that the board have asked us to be responsible for.
Oh, okay.
And
You're- I'm sorry.
during the discussion of the consent agenda is usually when we discuss those policies. So what I would suggest, if there is something about 5010, if we can talk about it after the meeting, and then I can talk with board leadership if we need to put it back on the agenda to make
Yeah,
any
it's just
additional
two
changes.
words that I think are.
So we've already voted on that, so if we can move forward and then we can talk
good.
about it.
I was
and-
just, I'm thinking policy, so then I didn't even remember or even think that we had it. Never mind.
Okay.
Long story longer. Let's go ahead.
All right. So is there any discussion on ER9?
You know, I was just going to say, this is actually something I was going to bring up in the good of the order. But it ties into this nicely because I think with what we've seen with social media, with our communication with the community, even with, as we are going through the search process for a new superintendent, there's that realizing how important that communication with the public is. And I just wanted to commend the board and those that are working directly with social media, et cetera, and almost everyone I've seen for kind of choosing a higher ground in a sense. When the levy didn't pass, when some of the comments that I saw, there was a lot of opportunity to turn around and kind of twist things. And there were some things where I saw where there was misinformation, but also missing information. And just to see the effort that the district made to fill in those gaps. Anywhere somebody brought something up, someone was patiently trying to explain it. And I think, although the levy did not pass, I think it shows that there has been a concerted effort to improve that communication. And I think we are in a good trajectory on that. And I was going to say something for the good of order, but I feel like it falls in there because some of that was even specifically addressed in the response. So
Thank you.
So thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, I've heard a motion on finding the superintendent in compliance with ER 9. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, any opposed? Nothing heard. That is approved. Now to the adjournment. So let's go good of the order. So Arla, let's start down there with you.
Okay. I guess I'll talk about yesterday. Dana was a guest at St. Hugh Episcopal where I attend, and the congregation wanted to honor the work that Dana has done since she's been here. And John Campbell, former school board member, kind of led that effort and spoke many eloquent words about Dana, which I won't be able to repeat, but I just thought it was very, I also liked what Vicki Betzinger said about, you're going to have a lot of these various accolades and recognitions from various areas, but this is a chance for the faith community to share their appreciation for what you've done for children in this community, and I hope you felt appreciated. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that was very special, and it was a neat thing to be able to be there and see that. For the good order, I already brought up choosing the high road, and I don't want to steal from sports or anything else that people might say, but I was just going to say, recently I've been in the buildings a few times, and I just wanted to comment on how happy I was to see administration dropping in, specifically principals dropping into classrooms. And I got the feeling that they were there just to kind of check on the vibe and see how their folks were doing.
Yeah.
Not there necessarily to grade them or correct them on anything. And I love to see that, because I think having that connection, that building up our future leaders is essential. And I've just been happy because I haven't been in the buildings a ton the last month, but every time I was in there, I saw an example of it, and that just made me happy. So, thank you.
The communication part, I just could add it there, but something I heard from the community in many different voices, they're like, I'm really surprised it didn't pass. And I'm like, why didn't it pass? And I'm like, I don't know, why didn't it pass? I said, there's probably a lot of things, and then they asked when and what, and I said, you got to start coming to the meetings, and then you'll know. The other got to come and see Dana's award, and I ended up at a different church because I didn't pay attention, and I was just driving straight there, and one church, and then I went to the second church, and they were just talking about her, and then they stop everything and go, come on up to the front, and I'm going, oh, great. And I sit down, but it was so sweet, and you can tell that John was very he was honored and excited to be able to be part of that again and to be able to say that to you, that he could. I almost felt like he was almost stumbling over his words just to get him out because he was so excited. And giving you a plant, I feel like they were saying, and here's one to grow on. So I just thought that was like the sweetest thing. But I did end up at my church. I was going to stay, and then I went, I'm going. I'm just going to keep going because my church started just a little bit later. So I went to mine, and I got to go to 3 church services, but I got to hear from 3 different groups of community, Episcopalian and Lutheran and Assembly of God, about our levy, and how they thought it should pass, and that they, are excited to see what happens next, So I was like, wow, it's a pretty neat day.
Emily.
Oh.
You got anything else?
Huh? Oh, yeah, no, I'm happy. Sorry. I should say over and out or. Yeah.
No, I kind of said it about the sports. I am very proud to be, being able to represent that. We went to state, and I'm pretty sure for girls at least, girls basketball hasn't gone to state since 1989.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really great to have that pride back in you for knowing that your accomplishments have or your hard work led to the accomplishments. And I'm just glad that the trimester is almost over.
So we have some students competing at the State DECA conference this weekend, so good luck to them and safe travels.
They found another chaperone. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Got your schedule.
And I do appreciate the presenters tonight. I think it needs to be recognized more that the district has more on its plate than just raising test scores and grades. We have so many students facing diversity. We have students who have buried siblings. We have students that experience homelessness, that experience abuse, that have parents with incurable diseases. And I know that in discussions around the levy, we have community members who want to see us raising test scores. And there's a lot of gaps that our district fills to build a whole child. And I want to recognize the admin and the teachers and even fellow students that do that for our kids. So I do appreciate that very much, all of you. And I want to say thanks. I only was able to make it out to Tacoma for the girls' basketball game. I was not able to go to the wrestling matches. And I saw North Mason admins there. I saw teachers there. I saw community members there. And it was just so great that they're going out to these district and state level competitions to support our student athletes. We actually had a student athlete who last year set a goal. I am going to make it to state, and I'm going to be at the Tacoma Dome my senior year. And while I'm not sure it's happening at the Tacoma Dome because of facility switches, that student athlete accomplished that goal. And I think that's just, it's so amazing. We have so many amazing kids. So I think we need to remember that behind the banners and the trophies and the medals that our students earn, there are individual names there and individual dreams and goals and aspirations. And I hope that our community continues to recognize that. So thank you, all of you that show up every day.
Very good. Yeah.
That was so beautifully said. I think I'm going to cry. But no, it is very exciting. And I think this particular winter season in athletics and in other activities, it's worthy of noting that our kids who participate are going to the next level at the regional, the districts, and the state level across the board. And so some are going farther than others, but North Mason is developing and building and showing people a level of excellence that we expect in our school and that our kids can aspire to and achieve, and we should be really proud of our kids.
Agreed. So I apologize for not being at the event. I was catching for a child in Kent. Or I would have been there. But I did pass along quite a few words to John. So the athletics thing, I will say, it is just absolutely amazing to see how many of our sports team, and I'll go to the communication part. It's just so awesome to see our basketball team, our wrestlers, right? The band, the bowlers, like all of that being represented and put out there and competing at a high level. It's just great to see. And then the other part was in the consent agenda tonight, we approved the new superintendent's contract. So that is now complete, and we will have a meeting, Nicole and I, Dana, and the new superintendent, Christine. We'll be having a introduction section to start the transition planning stages of this whole thing. So we're super excited to Nicole and I pass this off and let them go off and run it. So it's been a long effort. I think I said it that night when we went through this. Thank you, every single one of the board members up here, for how much time everybody put into this. It was a lot. We were sat in that room for a long time, but ultimately, I'm super proud of how we went through that and all the time we took to make a great decision. So super excited. So that being said, that's all I have there. So now back to you, Dana, to talk about.
Yes, I would like to request that the board schedule in conjunction with our March 24th board meeting that we begin the evening at 5:30 with a study session to look at all sorts of funding conversations, but particularly around our staffing for next year, our projected, very early projected budget, because there will be many opportunities to make adjustments as the legislature finishes their work, as we get further information about federal funding, as we get a positive response from the district about a levy. But preliminary budget discussion is very important to have at this point in time. And also as part of that conversation, to have the board start talking about next steps and engaging and getting our community committee reconstituted and energized and moving forward, and all of that kind of coming out of that discussion, hopefully.
Did you say you just want to start at 5:30 next time?
Yeah, an hour early.
I'm fine with that.
Is that
work for everybody's
doable?
schedule?
I may be on travel that day, but I'll still be able to zoom in if I am. So
Okay.
that should be fine.
Leanna?
Oh, I'm good. What day is that? That's the
24th, Monday.
March 24th.
It's a Monday, yeah.
And now you're the one with the.
I know. So I was like, let me turn on my work phone. I'm pretty sure that's good. We should be good.
Okay. All right, that works.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our board self-assessment. Nicole. Wait.
No,
Oh.
Nick.
I can walk over there and hand it to her. I'd be more than happy
Been a long day.
to. All those.
I just looked down.
All the teasings from middle school come flashing back. You know? Great. Wonderful. So for general board meeting, I found us satisfactory in all items. And as I listened and paid attention during the meeting, and do appreciate the break that we had and the option for that, I found that we were, yes, in compliance for all the governance principles, and I found us satisfactory overall for tonight's meeting.
Very good.
Thank you for that. shortness.
So our next board meeting, we will be here for a special study session on starting at 5:30, followed on by our next school board meeting on March 24th at 6:30 p.m. That being said, meeting adjourned at 8:34.
There's a lot to sign back there.
I know, it's